Welcome to Scruffy City Aquatics live stream, and this is the second episode of Algae Happens. Thank you for joining us today. We do not have anyone in the chat just yet, so I'll take a moment and say thank you to all of you here for the replay. Thank you for joining us. My name's Mitch. This is my channel, and I am one of your hosts. Joining me, as usual, I have my buddy Tanner.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Looks like the notification just went out that we're live, so may see some people trickle in. But to those of you watching on the replay, thanks for watching. I know I always watch streams that I can't catch when they're live. I normally do some maintenance on my tanks and have them plugged into my headphones. So thanks for listening on the replay or watching. We appreciate it. Leave us a comment if you got any questions on anything we talk about. And Mitch or I will try and check it out. Looks like we've got TJ Autocross here tonight.
Yeah,
thanks for joining as always. Good to see you.
Welcome. Yeah, you were talking about live streams and catching them on the replay. One of my favorite live streams to catch and be involved in, I've talked about it on here before, is Bob Steenfott's live stream. And I was able to lurk last night, but I was not able to participate all that much because I had to do an emergency water change on the 25-gallon. So I'll talk about that for a moment before we get into just kind of chatting with others and the topic of algae tonight. The 25-gallon currently houses a lot of guppies. Like, I have no idea how many are there, but there's not a square inch that doesn't have a guppy in there at least. It's getting tight. I'm needing to start getting rid of some of them. And but they're looking great, and it's hard to choose who to let go of. But also, I still have more than a dozen green cories in that tank. And then last week we were talking about the fact that I pulled some eggs and hatched them, and had about, I don't know, I ended up with like 30 fry. Well, this one was going to be this hatch and raise was going to be different because the previous time that I did it, I was home. And because I was home, I was able to watch them more closely, keep them fed, do water changes, just kind of stay on top of things. Plus, once they hatched, they were in a 10-gallon tank by themselves. So it was just them and a tank that had been running for a while. It's not the case this time, and I'm afraid to say that I lost most of them. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I tested the water, and nitrates were through the roof. Now, not anything dangerous for the older fish, but anytime you have fry, they're a little more susceptible to those. I don't know if it's just the swing or if it's nitrates in general. They don't do well with them. So unfortunately, I was having to pick through a few bodies. I don't know exactly how many I have because I have stuffed moss down in the container. That's the other thing. I've got them in a smaller container than I've been using. That is got holes to the main tank. So I'm trying things differently. It's not working out so well for me this time. Definitely need to get a better breeder box. I think I'm going to get one of those mesh ones. They have a lot more flow through them. Not that would have helped these, but I should have just checked the water earlier.
I had some issues with actually on a guppy tank as well. That 40-gallon that I've got with all those black Moscow guppies, they had a population explosion, and the plants were growing like crazy. And to be quite honest, I just put it on cruise control, and then I was like, I wonder what the nitrates are. I was like, I might as well test it. I haven't done it in a while. Through the roof.
Right.
So I immediately I got them down to a safer range, but I was like, man, what happened here? Like, I think it's just guppies. The population explosions that they do. But real quick, we got Dave with Basement Aquatics with Dave. Dave, it's always good to have you in the chat. We've also got Nancy B in Tennessee and Red Laser. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us in the chat. There's a few comments here I want to jump to. TJ says, I cannot get rid of, it just covers you up. Hold on. There we go. I cannot get rid of hair algae in my 40-gallon planted tank. Just switched from trying to choke out the algae and now focused on growing the plants. Not sure what I'm doing, honestly. Well, you're actually on the right track. That's one thing that I will probably say a few times tonight. I would say focus on growing the plants. Algae's normal. Algae's going to happen. Algae happens. You're going to have algae in the tank. The trick is not to defeat the algae so much as to succeed with the plants, and the plants will take care of the algae. They'll help. I mean, there's some things that you might need to tweak in order to get rid of the algae, but especially hair algae, you'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about outcompeting that algae and the survival of the fittest. If your plants are growing well and doing, robust growth, then it's going to be a lot harder for algae to take hold in massive amounts. Now, like Mitch was saying, every tank has algae. You will not be able to find a single tank and go comb through every square inch of the tank and not see algae somewhere. It's part of nature.
Yep. It's a good thing. It's showing you that organisms are able to live in your tank. You're succeeding already. We just don't like the look of algae. So, but we'll talk about hair algae a little bit more, I'm sure. Nancy B says, anytime I do this, it kind of covers us. I just need to back us up. I found my first non-live bearer fry today. It was in my native tank. Not sure what it is. Hope it survives. So congratulations, Nancy B.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's fun.
It's always so exciting seeing your first non-live bearer fry because it's a lot more involved. But that's awesome. If you can, I would try and maybe move it to get it in a mesh breeder box or something to isolate it from everything else. You may have already done that, but that would probably just help the survival.
Yeah, that's a special one to grow up. I know the first Corys that I hatched, and I only have one of them well, I guess it was the second one, but the first ones that I hatched, I only have one of them, but that's a special one. Whenever it swims by, I go, "Aw, that's the one." I see the Zen Ginger is here. Welcome, Zen Ginger. Thank you for joining us. I know you're out and about. Thank you for being a mod, super mod around here. And for any one of our mods who make it, thank you for being here and helping out. Handling this rowdy bunch, keeping everyone in line. It's never a problem. But we thank you. And we thank you for the links, too. I know I sent some links to Zenny earlier. Said, we might bring these up if you want to have them.
Definitely if appreciate you and everything you do.
Could be a week-old dace. That's cool.
Oh, wow. The dace are really cool. I was actually at, I think, McKay's, the used bookstore, and they had a book on native fish. Every time I go to McKay's, I pick up a couple of aquarium books.
Yeah.
And it's just,
that's a good idea.
It's cool. I like having the pictures.
Is there a McKay's in Nashville, or are you talking about when you come to Knoxville?
There's actually, when I was in Knoxville this weekend for a wedding. So I went to McKay's in Knoxville, but I've also got a McKay's in Nashville that's 5 minutes.
So the McKay's in Knoxville, this is kind of off track. Where are the fish books? I have searched that place and I could not find them.
So if you find the aisle with like pet care and plants and gardening, it's okay. If it's on the end that's closest to the media, like it's on that part of the aisle.
Is it along the wall or one of the?
It's one of the middle of the store.
All right, that's all we need. Yeah, we won't.
It's a real small section, but I've probably got. I mean, most of this bookshelf behind me is fish books.
Oh wow! Okay, well I have missed it. Then I'd like to pick up a few, especially some native stuff. I'm really interested in this after talking with Derek a few times, and then we've got some stuff coming up with the ETAA. We're hoping to do a collection event with the Kentucky Club, the Lexington Club. That would be a lot of fun. Actually, it would be fun, and it will be fun for some, but not me because I'm actually on vacation the week that it will be taking place. So you're gonna miss that.
We definitely need to get Derek on, maybe in the spring.
Yeah.
Talk about what they do, or maybe before the spring, talk about what they do, because I know they go out and collect quite a bit of eggs as well. Be pretty interesting to hear about.
Yeah, they actually, I've got some insider info on that right now because I'm working on scheduling the ETAA speakers, and we were talking about a few things about doing something with conservative fisheries, conservation fisheries, not conservative fisheries. That's totally wrong. Conservation Fisheries Incorporated, CFI, about doing something there in order to introduce the club to CFI a little bit more, because we're actually thinking about partnering with them, the kind of sponsoring them and trying to help out in a few ways. Maybe some volunteer work, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. We're definitely talking with them about in June doing a snorkeling event here too. So that'll be a lot of fun. Get to snorkel in some of the rivers here. I'll make sure you know when that it's going to be in June. I know that.
I would
But
love that.
in May, that will probably be when we do something at CFI because he said that's typically when they have the most stock. So that'll be a good time sometime around May.
I remember
Regina
I
Felice
was
is here.
Oh, welcome, Regina. I was so disappointed because I found out about CFI after I moved to Nashville. I was like, I could have been volunteering and working with fish for the whole time I was in Knoxville. And then as soon as I leave Knoxville, find out about all this great fish stuff in Knoxville. Like, come on.
Yeah. You're just going to have to move back. Jimmy P's here. Welcome, Jimmy P. I hope you're feeling better. I didn't catch your last live stream, so I don't know what the update was, but I know you've been under the weather like many of us, and I hope you're feeling well today. Yeah, CFI. That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to that because I missed when you and I tried to tour. I missed it. I ended up having to leave, unfortunately, and so I haven't been able to make it back out there. And they've been busy as well. We've not been able to get on the same page, but yeah. And we're coming up on our 12th meeting. We include the swaps. We're coming up on our 12th meeting of the ETAA, and that just blows my mind. We're about to hit 1 year of meetings. And we're actually I don't know if you saw this today. I announced it today over on the in the Facebook group. But one of the local stores, Aquatic Marine, some people may know them from Aquaticon, has volunteered to host our social at their store, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I saw that today. I believe it is December 11th. Is that
That's right? Second weekend in December. Making sure we didn't do it the same week you all did.
That is on a Sunday, though.
Oh, that's right. We had to move it to Sunday.
If it was a Saturday, maybe. I'll try and be there. I want to
come to for the beginning of it.
We've got our meeting is going to be the Music City Aquarium Society Club meeting is that Saturday before December 3rd. I don't think he's in the chat. He might come in at some point, but John is going to be speaking at this meeting.
John Tyler?
So, yes.
All right.
So pretty stoked about that. He was at the last meeting and got to talking, and I was like, hey, you should speak sometime.
That's funny. I actually just booked him too.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, not for it. It'll be later in the year.
Yeah, don't go stealing all my stuff
now. We need to just share notes. We know a lot of the same people. We've got some great ones. We're not ready to announce them with the ETAA yet, but we got to work and we've booked up through June. Actually, I think we haven't talked about a date for you, but we've got another talk that we're going to have you come out and do on high-tech plants. We're looking forward to that. We've had a lot of questions about high-tech plants within the club, so we thought we'd do something specific to that. And it was a short list of people we thought would do a good job at that. And you were on it. And after everybody else said no, we asked you.
Scraping the bottom of the barrel for this one.
What's funny is I tried to volunteer for a talk, and they were extremely they were extremely generous and nice in how they told me no. I was like, oh, I think I could come up with something. I could do something on this. And they're like, oh, somebody else could do that. I was like, oh, you're right. That's fine.
I'm excited for it though. I enjoyed the first time I spoke at the oh Lord, this was a couple months ago, I guess now.
Yeah.
The presentation Sean and I gave that
Yeah.
same presentation at our first Nashville club meeting, and it was pretty enjoyable. Looks like Mitch might be frozen, but we've got Ray Aquatics. Thanks for joining us in the chat. Good to see you tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. While Mitch is gone, we're going to be talking about episode 2 of our algae series. We'll get into that in a little bit. I know we've already got some comments talking about algae and there he is, curse you, Comcast. We've lost him. Hopefully he'll be back in just a second so you won't have to listen to me continue rambling. Let's see here. But as Mitch and I were just talking about, we are both very active in clubs, and I definitely recommend, if you can, get involved with a local club. It adds so much community to the hobby and is really just an awesome resource for education, learning new things. Everybody keeps different fish, different plants, different style tanks, so it's just really cool seeing everyone else's experiences and learning about each other's hobby. Maybe we'll have Mitch back. Oh, there he is.
We just got lucky last time. Is what happened. Just got lucky. I'm gonna
jinxed it at the beginning before we went live.
Yeah, every time I think it's taken care of, it just rears its head back. Tuesdays. I don't know what it is about Tuesdays. Everybody's streaming apparently on Tuesdays. Were you getting? Oh, that means hold on. Let me pull this back up. I lost our background.
I was just rambling while you were gone, but we should probably go ahead
let's
and
get started.
Transition into some algae because I know
Join your local club.
We ran over a little
yes,
bit.
we did quite a bit. Sorry about that. We will try to keep up with the time. I know there's so many great streams out there, and we're extremely thankful for every one of you who are here. I know there's lots of great streamers out there and lots of great content you can and should be enjoying on replay. But thank you for joining us. It is a highlight of our week to be able to join you all for these conversations and to just kind of chat with you and with each other. So yeah, let's jump into it. So I don't know why I dropped it because I'm going to put it back up there. Algae happens. This episode is going to be causes of algae and how to prevent it. So we're going to be talking about, I know last time we talked briefly about some of the individual algae and maybe a little bit of the causes and what you can kind of do with it. It was, kind of a high level view looking down on it. And this week we're going to be a little more focused on algae as a whole. We may have a little bit of time to talk about some of the common algae and maybe what causes them and what you can do to get rid of them, but specifically. But I do want to preface a couple of things before we get started. Where's my fingers? This is odd because I got to put it right in here. Couple things. One, we're not experts. We're hobbyists, just like you are. So we're talking about this through the lens of our own experiences, as well as our own research, because as we experienced it, we got online, we've watched YouTube videos, we've scoured websites and forums and had lots of bad information and some good information. And so we just wanted to try and share some of that. So we're always talking from our experience and not from, not from a place of a professional, because we ain't. And then secondly, I don't know what secondly was. No. Secondly, I wanted to say that when we're talking about causes of algae, it's important to realize, just like we've talked about last week, I'm pretty sure, that there's no one cause for any one algae. And more often than not, there's could be many causes. And more often than not, you don't have just one algae. A lot of times you'll have multiple. I know when I first started getting blackbeard algae on my Anubias, I also had some green spot algae there. And so I couldn't tell, what is this green spot algae with the black threads starting or fuzz starting to grow on it? I started looking up what goes from green to black, and nothing. That's because both of them were growing at the same time. They were taking advantage of what they had. And so that happens a lot of times. So it's not always going to be as simple as you just need to do this. Unfortunately, that's just not the game. The game is trying to find balance in the tank and to keep it there. Now, there are some things you can do in order to give yourself a head start. We talked a few weeks back about, how to instant cycle a tank. And the answer was you can't, but you can get a good jump start on it. And it's the same thing with algae. You can't prevent algae, but you can get a nice looking tank and keep the algae at bay. And so there's ways to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Most of the time, or if not a vast majority of the time, algae is caused because of an imbalance in your tank. You either have too much lighting, too little lighting, too much nutrients, too little nutrients, too much, or not necessarily too much CO2. That would more so affect your fish, but too little CO2. And
Yeah.
there are some algae which prefer different nutrients and they can take off, in different environments. But generally, you're all going to see them grow in sort of in an imbalanced tank or a tank that's not seasoned and developed, that has time to develop all of the biological aspects of a tank. And, you maybe run your lights for 10, 12 hours, and that's just dial those down, turn them down, and you got a lot less algae. So it's all about just trying to find, that balance in your tank to where everything's in equilibrium, essentially.
Right. Absolutely. Keeping Aquatics is here. So welcome. Glad that you were able to join us as well. Yeah, it's all about that balance. It's about finding where your tank needs to be in order to support what you're trying to grow. And also, when we're talking about this, our perspective is from planted tanks because we are sold on the benefits of growing plants in our tanks. And the truth is, if you're trying, maybe you're trying to keep an inhabitant that there's not a lot of plants you can keep with it. Usually there's something, but and you can work out. There's ways to work around a lot of fish. Not all of them. I know some of them just going to tear into them, and you have issues. But apart from that, I highly recommend having plants because if you're trying to keep an aquarium without plants, you're really, you have lighting and nutrients, you're going to grow something. So if it's not plants, you're going to be fighting some kind of algae, and so you'll just have to do a little bit more to to get rid of it or to keep it at bay. Whereas someone with plants can actually just keep growing plants and probably reach that balance a little bit easier than someone trying to do this without plants.
Definitely. And for those of you, if anyone here in the chat doesn't keep plants in their tanks, just think of there are more benefits to plants than just this,
Yeah.
but you can think of plants in simple terms as a way to export nutrients. So for people who keep planted tanks, we've got two means of nutrient exportation: the plants, water changes. If you don't have plants in your tank, really just up to water changes to get those nutrients out. Um, so that's, if you don't have the plants and you're getting algae, it's lighting and nutrients are where you just really want to focus, and kind of dial those back. Might be running the lighting too long. You might not be doing as much water changes that you need because those plants really help add a buffer to, uptake nutrients and waste, in your tank.
Yeah. Yeah. So causes of algae would be, Tanner's already brought it up, an imbalance of nutrients. So you either have too much or too little nutrients. And the we talked about this last time too. Think of a triangle, right? You have CO2, which is what limits most of us, unless you're keeping a high tech. Well, even a high tech tank, it's probably what's limiting you. CO2, lighting, and fertilizer or nutrients, not necessarily fertilizers, because some plants you can do it without adding fertilizer. You could just be doing other means. But anyway, um, those are the three things that both plants and algae, because algae is a simple single-celled plant. It's basically doing what plants do. So these organisms are going to use these three things. And when they're in a balance, you're getting optimum growth out of your plants and very little algae, less algae. But if any of those three kind of get off, it's the algae is a lot better at utilizing what is available than your plants are. Your plants are picky. They're picky eaters. They want the food to be just right. They want it to be the right temperature. It can't be cut wrong. It needs to be there at the right time. And when they're full, it needs to be taken away. Don't leave it in front of them. It makes them mad. That's how plants are. Algae live their life like a buffet. They're always eating. They're always taking in. They don't care what it is. They don't care what it looks like. It's in front of them. They're going to eat it. And that's really why algae shows up in our aquariums, because it's not picky and our plants are. So an imbalance in nutrients, whether it's excess or scarcity, whether it's just that we don't have enough, algae can be promoted that way. You can start to see it growing. Um, that balance is not always easy to find. I've struggled with it at times. I feel like right now I'm in a pretty good place with the 75. I got a little bit of green spot algae showing up, so I'm trying to dial in my fertilizer a little bit more, and just contemplating pulling out the DIY CO2 again to throw everything in disarray. But because things are going too good, I got to change it, man. I can't just let this thing be. But anytime you make a change like that, anytime you're making a change, it's going to impact the other two, and you're going to have to find that balance again. So small changes over a longer period of time, and you can find success.
Definitely, yeah. In regards to the 40 gallon, which I think I spoke about last week, that I was having that photo of the cover is actually from my
Yeah,
tank with that staghorn and blackbeard I was killing off. I really focused more in on that tank within the past week and have already made huge differences. And I'm gonna have to take some after photos because that leaf that
yeah.
is in the photo on the cover is now completely clean.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Well, and
so
in this photo, it was dying off. That's why it's red.
mhm.
You had already treated it. So if anybody was wondering, it's not some crazy red algae. I mean, it is a red algae. That's why it died and turned red. But
Yeah, you
it
can
was
see
probably more of a green or
if you
black.
look to the right of that leaf, you can see the darker algae on the other leaves. That
Yeah,
how it looked before I treated it. But it's really just I tweaked a couple things and I found I was missing or lacking a component for the plants, which in my case was CO2. I upped the CO2 and saw more plant growth, and the algae started reducing after
yeah,
some manual removal, because algae is a much more opportunistic organism. It's much less complex than a plant, and I
yeah,
think that's something you don't have to be a biologist to see that. You can visually look and say that. I mean, it's more simple than a
yeah,
plant, so it can grow at a much more rapid pace and also acclimate to differing environmental conditions at a much
yeah,
faster pace. If your tank is out of balance and you're constantly changing things, your nitrates are going from 40 to 0 to 20, it's really going to keep those plants almost in a state of shock to where
yep,
they can't really take hold. And you want them to be good and established and, in a sense, for lack of a better word, acclimated to your environment.
yeah,
When you first buy plants, they got to acclimate to your tank, acclimate to being underwater for a lot of times.
yeah,
Um, so it's really just all about, you know, keeping, you're not steering a little rowboat, you're steering the Titanic,
yeah,
small changes.
right. I wanted to jump on a couple of comments here because I think they're great insights. Keeping aquatics. Algae can be caused by too little lighting. The more you know. Yeah. So what happens is if you've got too little lighting and maybe you've got an abundance of nutrients the algae is going to be able to use those nutrients more than your plants are, because your plants are struggling from not having enough light. And it could also be the case for CO2. I was trying to think of, I was thinking on this week. I don't know of an instance where too much CO2 could be a problem. It could be, but I've never experienced that or heard it. I don't have high-tech tanks, so.
Now, I know
Yeah.
that blackbeard algae and staghorn, they're typically found in tanks with CO2 fluctuations.
Yeah, the up and down.
The up, yeah, way too much up and down, and also, your CO2 tank runs out, say, and you don't
Yeah.
replace it for a week. That's when I have had blackbeard and staghorn pop up, and also when there's too little CO2. But I don't like you said, I don't know of a circumstance where too much CO2
Yeah.
could. I mean, of
The,
course,
the
there's a
only thing,
limit. I feel like in this case, your fish would more so be the limiting factor with
that's what
CO2.
I was going to say. I do have a scenario where it would happen, because if you gassed off all of your fish, they would rot and you'd have ammonia spike, and that would feed the algae.
Yes.
So there we go. That's it. But that's an extreme. That's not something that would easily happen. And also, like the DIY CO2, this is why it's really not worth it. It's a hassle to try and keep up with DIY CO2. For me, it lasted like 3 or 4 days in the 75, and I'd be mixing again. And then when you miss it and it misses a day, your plants, they don't like that. And they're like, you know what? I'm just shutting down for a week. I'm not working. And that's when you start having issues again. So you got having that consistent. That's why high tech CO2, or we call it high tech, but it's just a regulator. That's why having a regulator on a tank, your tank's going to hold a lot more CO2. It's going to last a lot longer. You're going to have a greater chance of catching it and getting it swapped out, as opposed to every few days. I mean, in a smaller tank, you can get about a week out of DIY CO2. I mean, maybe in a 20-gallon, you can do better than that. I'm not sure, but um, I was hoping to get a week out of mine, and I was nowhere close to a week. When I had it running good, I was about 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. See, I have a 5 pound tank on this 40, and I get a couple months
Yeah,
out of it. And I kind of, you said the word high tech, and I'm going to steal this terminology from George Farmer. If you all don't know who George Farmer is, look him up. He is a brilliant aquascaper in Europe. But he uses these terms for tanks that I really have kind of been drawn to, and it's low energy and high energy.
yeah,
Because you can have a high tech or a high energy tank with low, the technology doesn't necessarily drive what
right.
style of tank it is. You can have a high tech tank, but you're, you know, not really injecting much CO2. So it's really the energy inputs, meaning lighting, fertilizer, and CO2.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, high
so
tech has become that internet term to represent something that it really doesn't necessarily represent. Like you're saying, if you've got a Fluval 3.0 and you've got an app, you've got a high tech tank, whether you're putting CO2 in there or not. But if you're not using CO2, then the power there, what that you're getting, the growth that you're getting, is just not there.
yeah, I think that for a lot of people, the terminology, the difference in term between low tech and high tech is just CO2. Once they
Yeah,
see CO2, they're like, oh, it's high tech. And I
right.
think in the future, we should probably do a series on CO2 because it's not as complicated nor scary
No,
as
no,
it is intimidating. I will say that
right.
before you get into it, it is intimidating. You can try the DIY route, but I've not found a system that will output consistent CO2 levels even throughout the
Yeah,
day. So that's where you're going to get a lot of algae thrives in out of balance, inconsistent environments. The name of the
right.
game with aquariums is consistency.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it is good to be able to infuse some CO2 in there, but if you can't keep it constant, it's just going to cause more problems. It did. It did for me. That's why I didn't hook it back up. I started running into issues, and it was just because I wasn't at home all the time anymore to catch it and to fill it up. It's real easy if I'm working from home every day to spend an extra 10 minutes mixing up, baking soda and what was it? Baking soda and vinegar? I don't think it was vinegar. Anyway, whatever the concoction is. But you miss it and you've got a problem. So Keeping Aquatics also said this sounds like it could be a slightly complicated issue to discover the cause of, just because so many factors could cause it. And that is absolutely the case. And that's why those small changes over time is how you fix it. Because anytime you just so take for example, you've got Blackbeard, and you decide I'm gonna drop the water level below my plants, and I'm gonna spray them all with hydrogen peroxide, and you kill it all. You fill it back up, and you go to bed. You wake up the next day. You go to work. You come home, and you've got an ammonia spike because you killed all that BBA, and now you've got a fluctuation in nutrients taking place that not only becomes dangerous to your fish, but is going to lead to more problems with algae because you're feeding algae with your ammonia. You might have killed what was there, but if you kill too much at one time, you can create a problem.
Definitely, yeah. It's more so algae is the symptom of an out of balance tank. It is not the cause. So getting rid of the algae through manual or chemical means or a cleanup crew is not going to solve your problems. That algae is going to keep coming back because it's a symptom of the cause. And like Mitch said, when you're making changes to your tank, you want to limit the independent variables. You want to try and change one thing. Unless your tank is just all out of whack and you find that out, then make it, try and dial it in, and set it to a baseline. But don't go changing. Oh, my light, I'm dropping my light intensity all the way down. Just don't go changing all of your inputs. Try and change one input at a time.
Yeah. Lower it slowly. Find that balance. That the chances are that the algae is not going to take over overnight. It's something that, see, what happens most of the time is we see it and we're like, oh, well, hopefully that doesn't take hold. And then several weeks later, it's like, oh man, that looks horrible. What do I need to do? But when you see it, if you start making some small corrections, and it takes some research, we've got some information here we're going to talk about. But yeah, that CO2 fluctuations can cause it. Nutrients can cause it. Sometimes adding nutrients can cause it. When we were talking about fertilizers, when we talked about how to fert a tank, if you've just started a tank and you've just added all your plants, you really don't need to be adding fertilizer to begin with, because your tank's going to have a little bit of a break-in period. Your plants don't want anything to eat. Same thing with your fish. A lot of times we're told when you get your fish home, don't feed them that day. Turn off the light, let them just kind of get used to it, try to feed them the next day. It's the same thing with your plants. They don't want to eat as soon as their roots have been shoved down into the substrate. It's going to take them a little while before they get ready to start taking things in. As far as how long, I don't know. I don't know exactly how long. It's been a long time since I've started a tank, but I hope to be doing that here soon. And I might test that out a little bit and try to figure out what kind of time frame you need to give. That's a good question, though, that I just came up with. I wonder how long you should wait.
What I generally do is wait until the plants start pushing new growth. When they first start to push new growth is generally when you're like, okay, and that also varies on the type of tank you have set up. That's what's so kind of difficult with aquariums is every tank is its own, own environment. I know how the tanks react, the ones that I set up. I don't know. I probably would mess up Mitch's tank if I went and started messing with it. It's just
and that's the thing. I mean, you'd have to be a real expert to be able to walk into someone's house and just fix their tank.
Mm-hmm.
It'd probably take a lot of time and money.
So I normally wait till the plants start to push new growth, and then that's where I'm like, okay, I can start adding some fertilizers. And I also use the new growth as an indicator when if I've got algae in the tank or if I'm seeing some plant deficiencies, I'll add that fertilizer, wait, change one thing, wait until I see that new growth, and then see how that growth looks.
Yeah.
That is looking good and lush, and I've not gotten any algae, then I'm on the right track.
Right. Yeah. That's a great suggestion on watching that growth before you start. I like that. Another cause can be temperature. And this was one that I'd never really spent a lot of time thinking about, but as soon as I read it, it made sense, because higher temperatures promote more growth, right? It promotes more growth of organisms. We know that when you have warm, stagnant water, you grow more junk, right? But if you have cold water, you're less likely to have stuff growing in it. And it's the same thing in your tank with your algae. If you're keeping a warm tank, then you're probably going to have more algae that you're going to have to deal with. You might have pop up. Whereas if you're keeping a cooler tank, it's probably not as big of a deal. Now, that's not to say you should keep it a certain temperature. That's just to point out that it's a factor, not that it's something you need to chase, because, most of the time when we're keeping species, we try to keep them in a certain range. Most of us are keeping tanks in those mid 70s, maybe lower 80s. Lower 80s is pretty warm. That's probably going to have a greater chance of having some algae.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's with discus tanks that people keep warmer, that you sort of can struggle with plant growth, and it really keeping a warmer tank speeds up the entire tank. Your fish grow faster, your plants grow faster, and that also leaves you less of a window to catch when things are out of balance before algae explodes.
Right.
So that's why I actually keep my tanks on the lower end of the temperature range, depending on the species.
Right.
And I like the comment here from Regina. I've
That's
resigned
when I was
myself
about to click.
to living with a certain amount of algae. I think that's probably one of the best philosophies. That's how I am. I like to limit algae in most of my tanks. Some tanks, I let it grow how it wants to grow, just because it's beneficial for many fish. My shrimp, the tanks I've got shrimp in, I just let it go till it finds a balance eventually. That balance may have algae in the equation, or more, more algae. There's always going to be algae.
Yeah, being able to live with some is key to keeping a successful aquarium. I believe that wholeheartedly. You don't want it to grow out of control and to, one of the things that I know that I feared when I first got into plants, and the first time that I had to throw all my plants out, the algae had just covered everything and just completely snuffed it out. It had the plants couldn't get any nutrients. They weren't getting enough light and all that, and that's kind of your extreme. I didn't know what to do, and it just kept getting worse. So that's where some small changes. I also saw, let's see, Basement Aquatic says algae just happens. That's
algae
true.
happens.
I see Deb is here, and Deb says embrace some algae and snails. I agree. I love my snails.
It always hurts when people say they can't stand snails in their tank, because I'm like, I love my snails. It's the same exact thing with algae. Keep a balance.
Yeah.
The people that get snail infestations, where you just can't see in the tank because there's so many snails, out of balance.
Yeah, you're feeding too much.
Yes, the population grows the amount of food. And
Yep.
I just thought it was pretty cool. I did a quick Google search on how, we were talking about how algae is a much more simplistic organism than plants, because, algae evolved into plants, and algae was algae's over 1 billion years old. Well, land plants and plants evolved around 500 million years ago. So that's just shows how much more simplistic and how much more opportunistic algae is, that it was able to survive in those harsher environments so much earlier.
Yeah, it will survive in harsh environments. Lady Rorschach's here. So hello, Lady Rorschach. And I see Vibes Aquatics stopped by to give us a thumbs up. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. Fish Fam is a great place to be. Lady Rorschach says, love snails. I can't imagine an aquarium without them. Yeah, and I started off mainly with pond snails, and I didn't mind them. I knew that they were beneficial, so and I could watch them and kind of figure out if I'm overfeeding, and so they were kind of a great indicator for that. They're also an indicator for calcium, right? So you can tell if you're having calcium problems with your snails. And if they're eating plants, they're not eating plants or they're not eating healthy plants. They're eating plants that are already dying, leaves that are already dying back. So most snails that you would find in our tanks, that's the case. But yeah, and I recently ended up with some ram's horn snails, and they've been out competing the pond snails, and so I've got these really beautiful snails. I really like the look of these ram's horns, and I'm still getting all the benefits.
Yeah, I love the ram's horns are what's 98% of them. I did have the bladder and pond snails at one point, but the ram's horns, for whatever reason, just
Yeah,
outcompete them. And I've got them in all my tanks now.
yeah. Lady Rorschach says, agreed. They are the canary in the coal mine. That is true.
Definitely.
They let
The,
you know.
really, the only one of the only snails that I know of that's commonly sold in the hobby that would eat plants is an apple snail.
Yeah,
And
I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard they'll do that.
there's also an actual a type of ram's horn, not very common, but it's a giant ram's horn that
Mm.
is known to eat plants. Um, that Zinginger says she likes her assassin snails and the neorites. I love the neorites. The only thing that I don't like about them is the little eggs everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Now I did hear. I had someone give me some good advice on this. If you have a really good local fish store and you have a really good relationship with them, buy your snails one at a time. If you have white eggs show up, take it back, ask them if you can swap it for another one. And then when you don't have white snails, you have a male, you're good. You're not going to have to deal with the white eggs. And I thought that was just the best idea. But you got to have a good local fish store. Deb says she experienced the same thing. Ram's horns obliterated my pond snail population. I think that's really cool. I've never, it just happened. I just noticed. I was like, I'm not seeing pond snails anymore. Okay, we're going to jump on to Crown. Before Crown Tail Half Moon is here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome. I was laughing at the Zinginger's comment. You don't like your driftwood to look like it's been rolled in sesame seeds. That's exactly
No.
what they look like.
Yeah, and they don't come off, and it's such a pain to sit there and try to scrape them off. You get splinters underneath your nails. It's horrible. All
So
right,
while we're
let's. Yep, go ahead.
while we're still on the topic of preventing
Yeah.
algae.
Well, we're moving to preventing algae.
We're moving to
Good
preventing
segue,
algae.
because we were talking about
Right,
causes, and now we're
causes.
talking about preventing.
Okay, I'm here sitting here looking at our notes. One thing I want to really address is the role that ammonia plays
Yeah.
with algae. Algae will utilize ammonia first, quicker than plants will use nitrates. Algae will take up ammonia and start to grow and use that as a nutrient. And when that can become a problem is in new tanks, because you're going to set up the tank, you're going to do everything, but it's not going to get seasoned and really biologically diverse and all full of all of those beneficial bacteria, your nitrosomonas and your nitrobacters, which break down the ammonia and the nitrite into nitrate. So it's really important to try and limit ammonia spikes in your tank, because that's a way that algae can easily take hold. And once
Yeah.
it's taken hold in large quantities, it can be difficult to fully get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that ammonia, and it's we were talking about them being opportunistic feeders, and that's really where that comes into. It's easier to take in the ammonia, and there are some plants that do a I won't say a good job. But are some plants that'll feed off ammonia too, but they prefer nitrates. They prefer it in the form of nitrogen, and so that gives your algae. Anytime you've got a fresh tank and you're dealing with ammonia, you're likely going to have algae. Here's the thing, though, that algae is going to help you control the ammonia. And in
Yeah,
that fresh tank, it's going to make it safer for the inhabitants. So it's, again, not necessarily a bad thing to have some algae in a new tank. You just don't want to let it get out of control.
definitely.
So
And that's
preventing algae.
that's the thing that I've always found interesting too. Is you'll see people post photos of their tank and it's covered with algae, and they say, "But my nitrates are zero. My all my nutrient levels are perfect. Well, at the end of they're not, because the algae is uptaking it. So it's really, I mean, it plays the
It's
same
true.
role as plants. You can have a full, I've seen goldfish tanks that are like a carpet of algae, and
Yeah.
it takes away, your nutrients. It does the same thing as plants, but it's not, for most people, it's not as aesthetically pleasing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It is. Oh, hold on. I do not want to leave this site. I'm still here, right? That was a weird pop up. I don't know how that came up, but that's scary. Um, so we talked about this, how to prevent algae, planted tank. That's one way. If you don't have plants in your tank, you're going to be dealing with more algae. Doesn't mean you can't beat it. Doesn't mean you can't have a great looking tank, but you're going to have a little more algae, or more likely to deal with algae. Um, unless you have something taking up the nutrients, it just means you're going to do a lot more water changes, probably.
Definitely.
So secondly, we would say cleanup crews. I think there is a problem though online where anytime someone has a problem with algae, people automatically tell them, "Oh, just get a mono shrimp," or "Oh, just get red cherry shrimp, just get an auto, just get these different cleanup crew animals." And the problem with that is, again, the algae is a symptom; it's not the problem. Getting rid of it's not going to fix the issue. And really, depending on what you get, I mean, they're only going to eat certain algae. They don't all eat all algae. So you could end up with a tank full of a bunch of Siamese algae eaters that are just bullying everything and jumping out of your tank, and still have green spot. Do they eat green spot? I don't think they do.
I don't think
Still
they
have
eat a
some
lot
of
of like the hair and thread
it.
algae and some
Yeah.
staghorn when it's dying off.
They
Um,
will eat some BBA though. They'll get rid of your blackbeard.
yes, they will help with that, definitely. And it's really, yeah, you just have to do research on what, will eat different types of algae, like snail. They'll generally get that green spot and stuff on the glass.
Yeah,
They'll
the
eat some
green
hair
slime
algae.
or the
And yeah,
green dust. They like the green dust.
yes, yeah, they'll leave that streak
Yeah.
on the glass. But like Mitch said, you're really just with the cleanup crew. My philosophy with it is that you're getting them to sort of maintain. You're not
Yep.
getting them to obliterate an algae problem, because anything that you put in your tank that could eat enough algae to get rid of a full, blown algae infestation, you're not going to be able to feed enough,
No,
because
you're going to
they're
run
just going to.
out.
That's like the thing within reef tanks. People get the sea hares. They will clean out a full tank of algae, but basically what you do is you take it back to the store, because you cannot
Yeah.
sustainably keep one. Um, but
Yeah,
and then
Zen
so
Ginger was pointing that out with Siamese algae eaters. It is the case. I've even heard people online talk about like renting them out from a fish store. Within our club, we've talked about it. Can I borrow one? At one point, I was going to put Florida flagfish in the 75 to get rid of the BBA. And then I found out they would obliterate my red cherry shrimp. And so I can't do that.
oh yeah,
Um, but it's one of those things where a cleanup crew is good. I definitely think we should have cleanup crews. But like you said, they're more preventive than they are to fix. They're not going to fix your problem.
right.
Um,
If
and with
anything, they'll
shrimp,
add to it because of the
yeah, they can
extra waste they're going to produce.
bioload. Yeah. And one thing, so like I have autos. I love auto sinkless. It's one of my favorite fish. If I had a quarantine tank, I probably would have a lot more autos because I want to buy them. I just like to keep my autos in quarantine before I add them because a lot of times they're wild caught. They're going to have parasites. So autos, you want to keep them. You want to keep them aside for a little while before you put them in the tank, just to be sure. But I'd love to have some more. At one point, I think I had maximum of like 7 or 8. Right now, I have only counted 3 at one time, but the tank's pretty heavily planted. There could be more, but I don't think there's too many more. But I've had them. I've had them 7 or 8 years at this point. Maybe. Do they live that long?
I
I've had them a
don't
very
know.
long time. They're old. Um, Shrimp, red cherry shrimp, I love them. They don't eat a lot of algae. They just don't.
Really,
They pick through.
I think they more do the biofilm
Hmm.
almost, but they don't really. I wouldn't say. if you're getting a shrimp to eat some algae, you want an amano. They
Yep.
like decimate algae. Um, on that note, I guess if we have time, I'll give a quick rundown of what a cleanup crew in my tank looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So say, it's a good size. This is for a medium to large size tank, probably minimum 50 gallons or so.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the Siamese algae eaters, I'll keep a couple of those, maybe 2, 3 nearite snails,
Because the
amanos.
algae eaters, they get big, like they're 4 inches plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, we
A lot
saw
of people
some
don't realize that.
at Sean Peck had those Siamese algae eaters that were pretty good size. Autocinquus, like Mitch said, he loves autos. I love the autos. They're just cool little fish.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be quite honest, I'm not big on plecos for algae eating.
Yeah.
I think they do the best job. I think they're oversold as an algae eater.
Yeah.
Like Stephen P. Just commented. Also, most fish labeled as algae eaters will only eat it when no other food is available.
Yep.
I completely agree with that because you look at your mollies, for example. You go without feeding them for a couple days, they're eating algae.
Yep. Most live
Especially,
bears will if you're not feeding them a lot. But yeah, that is definitely the case, and that's true with all of your cleanup crew. If you're feeding them well, they're not going to eat the algae because they have food available. You don't starve them, but you just can't feed them on that, as well. You're giving them, steak, they're not going to eat the salad.
yeah, you also have to definitely make sure you're providing enough food for them, anyways, because a lot of times you'll put them in there and they just eat algae. Well, what happens if you don't have much algae in the tank and you're not feeding them? It's more so
Yeah.
they're they're not just a maintenance member in your tank.
Mm-mm.
They're part of the ecosystem.
They'll do it. They'll do some of it, but that's not their purpose. They're a pet. And I love my autos. I love my cherry shrimp, and I love my amanos. Uh, Amanos are great. The one thing that I think some people need to realize about amanos is cherry shrimp. I've got literally hundreds in the 75 because they breed like crazy. Amanos will not breed in your freshwater tank. They actually need brackish water to breed. So amanos, that's something you're going to have to buy every now and then to keep them in the tank. But they do eat algae. They do a really good job at it. And I love mine. I rarely see them. And when I do, I run for a camera because I want to get pictures of them because I think they're gorgeous.
They are. I've seen documented where someone has captively bred a mono shrimp, and it seemed to have been a very intensive
Yeah.
process. But it's something I would eventually like to
Yeah.
maybe attempt.
I think it'd be cool. I just don't, seems like a lot of work. But I
Looks
mean,
like
if you were able to supply a local place with Amanos, that'd be pretty cool. Be the
that
Amano
would
guy.
looks like we've got Shelby from the Garden of Eater.
Hey, Shelby, welcome.
They know their shrimp.
Yes, they do,
While we're on the
and
topic,
more. They are expanding currently,
shrimp
putting some fish
plants.
tanks in front of the camera. So we did clean up crews. Let's talk about established biological filtration. We talked about filtration not long ago on our live streams. We already mentioned, Tanner mentioned that algae thrives from ammonia. And so insufficient filtration will feed algae because you're providing it with the nutrients that it can more easily take advantage of. So your plants aren't going to take as much advantage. You really need that nitrogen cycle putting out nitrates. Your plants prefer nitrogen.
Yeah, you definitely want ammonia to be present for minimal time in your tank. You want to have a solid biological capacity. Whenever I do a tank, I always try to go in excess, add so much surface area for biological growth and bacteria, just to be absolutely sure. Because sometimes you might have something go wrong and your tank crash. But if you've
Yep.
got enough biological capacity, you should, in most circumstances, be okay. And a lot of times that's when algae will overtake. You have a fish die. You have something go wrong in your tank and it gets out of balance, ammonia spikes. Algae is so opportunistic that it'll just swoop right in and boom, you've got it.
Yep. And when that happens, again, in that situation, you don't really need a change, right? Because you were fine before that happened. So when you get back on track, it's not that a drastic change needs to take place to get rid of the algae. You're just going to have to go through that period of time where it does take advantage of it, and then it's gone. Doing something drastic may cause more problems. So you've got filtration. Another one that I was thinking about was flow, and that kind of goes along with the filtration. You don't want some species, you don't want too much flow, but your plants will benefit from having flow in your tank, as well as you don't want dead spots for detritus and mulm to build up too much, because that will feed your algae. That will feed algae if you have those dead spots where the flow's not sufficient.
Definitely, yeah. Anywhere where organic waste settles is more susceptible to algae. That's why, a lot of times I always try to have my flow set to where all the plants are kind of gently waving in the flow at minimum, just to keep organics off of them and try and keep algae back. Now, on the other hand, your blackbeard algae and your staghorn algae can grow in areas of high flow. You'll typically see them on your filter outflow plants that are right near the outflow of your filter. So it's really it's like we've said throughout the stream, it's a balancing act. Not too much, not too little. It's the what is it? The soup, Goldilocks.
Yeah.
Not too hot, not too cold, just right.
Just right. Yeah, and the only place that I really have blackbeard taking hold, or not taking hold, it's always had a hold in the 75, is the spray bar.
Yeah,
where the most flow is taking place. That's where it's thriving. So it's definitely the case. Flow can be an issue. We didn't get to the point of talking about specific algae. Maybe we'll do that. I know that the next one, I don't have that in my notes, what we were going to talk about next. Should have that. I didn't. It'll be a surprise. It was algae related. I really thought I had it here, but I don't. That's okay. But we are at past the 9:30 mark. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this conversation. For everyone who came in, I was kind of laughing at Deb talking about putting neo shrimp in the 75, and now her snail population has receded, and she feeds her snails to clownfish, her clownfish tank. So yeah, that is one of those balancing things where those shrimp have definitely taken from those snails. But yeah, so anyway, I got sidetracked. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for checking out the channel. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we do, and you'll come back. We do this every Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. The channel, I occasionally put up videos. I'm not going to lie. I'm having a hard time getting to them right now. But something's coming eventually. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, like this, and yeah, that's it. So thank you, everyone who came by. Thank you to the mods, everyone in the chat, all of you lurkers. You all are awesome. Thank you, Tanner, for joining me again. And you all enjoy your tanks and stay scruffy.